Oceanpaddler founder Dean Gardiner is regarded by his peers as the best Australian downwind paddler of our time. His reputation founded on countless victories internationally at the world-renowned Molokai Challenge, at the ICF World Cup, World Regattas, and countless races across Australia. A 9-time Molokai World Champion, Dean's first Molokai was in 1989, and since then he has raced almost every one of the 53-kilometre Hawaiian enduros, the most revered ocean ski race in the world. Paddlers are faced with an ocean crossing traversing the Kaiwi Channel from Molokai Island to Oahu. And so dominant was Dean that the race record he set in 1994 was bettered in 1998 by himself. He held this record for 24 years, and it was only just broken in 2018 by his good friend and fellow Fenn paddler, Cory Hill. Perth born and bred, Dean was the founder of the iconic Doctor Race, a 27-kilometre downwind race from Rottnest Island to Perth. He staged his first Doctor in 2001, won it in 2022, and has built it up over the last 2 decades to the legendary event it is today. In 2002, Dean introduced ocean paddling to Australia through the introduction of Fenn skis to our shores and the development of the first ocean racing series. 2 decades of hard work and financial risk by Dean has seen the sport flourish in Australia, and now Oceanpaddler organises the Shore and Partners Australian Ocean Racing Series, a 16-race championship across 5 Australian states. Dean's a pioneer of ocean ski racing, and along with a handful of passionate paddlers from around the globe, he is largely responsible for the popularity of the sport today.
Welcome to episode 35 of the Normless podcast. I'm Dean Gardiner.
Now, in 1989, you did your first Molokai. This is known worldwide as one of the most revered ocean races. And Dean Summers, who I had on the podcast last week, he actually swam the Molokai. But you're in a surf ski. You paddle it almost every year, or you attend the event every year. What is it that's such a big draw to the event for you?
Well, the event's special in that it's a crossing type event, and they're the really, really cool ones, where you go from one landmass to another. And Molokai just happens to lie upwind of Oahu, and which makes that channel, the Kaiwi Channel, a really, really fantastic body of water to paddle in. So, you get the downwind stuff and the big ocean swell that rolls through that channel, and it's a reasonable distance. It's 52K, so it's not extraordinarily long unless you're swimming it, of course, like that other fella. But for paddling, you can bowl it over in just over 3 hours, and it's an exceptionally, when it's on, it's an exceptionally fantastic event to do.
Yeah. And so that when you say bowl it over in over 3 hours, I think that was the record you set, around 3.5 hours. So it's not everyone that can bowl it over in that amount of time. My dad, Matthew, who now living with dementia, but he went over there with Wayne Dunbar, and they, I think, tag teamed it, but took them well over, I imagine, 5 hours or so. So it's a big journey for the average paddler.
Well, that's because your dad had a weak link in Wayne, so
he's probably listening. He'll have a laugh. Yeah. And so you set the record in 1994, and you improved upon that 4 years later in 1998. And that record held strong for around, or just over 2 decades, so 24 years. Incredible achievement, and a testament to what we're going to talk about today, which is, your upbringing and getting into the sport of ocean paddling to become a 9-time world champion in the Molokai race. But I understand you grew up in Perth in the early days, and you started paddling as early as 13 years old. So take us back to that point in time in your life.
Yeah, so I grew up in Perth, and Perth in summer is it's a funny place. It has strong offshore winds in the morning and howling onshore winds in the afternoon, and that's pretty well nearly every day. So it's kind of 2 days in one, where you have this beautiful blue ocean with nice offshore winds blowing, and for a surfer, they're the ideal conditions. But summer in Perth doesn't really offer much surf, so you sort of look for alternatives. And for me, I stumbled across paddling at Floreat Surf Club, and I would go down there in the morning and sort of paddle along the coast, and then in the afternoon I would paddle upwind and then do a run downwind. And occasionally I'd jump on with the surf boat crew, who would drive down the coast towards Fremantle and jump in, and they'd put my ski on the boat and take me down with them, and I'd paddle back in the really big southwest winds that were blowing there. So it made it pretty easy to take on another sort of ocean sport rather than just surfing and the fishing stuff that I was doing. And downwind paddling in Perth is, there's no better place on earth than WA for that sort of thing. So it worked out. It worked out that I just got better and better at that, and I really enjoyed doing that, and found that I felt most comfortable when I was sitting on a ski in the middle of the ocean catching chop. Some people feel most comfortable sitting in an office looking at numbers. Some people feel comfortable, running through a forest. I feel comfortable out in the middle of the ocean catching ocean chop, and I sort of just love doing that, and just turned it into a sport, I guess, and got good at it.
Yeah, and it wasn't until those later teenage years that you got into more ocean paddling. So I guess early on in the days, as you said there, you weren't doing too much of that. You're doing a lot of swimming and surf life saving. What was the draw towards paddling over surf life saving? I mean, there was so many events at the time running around across Australia.
Well, for me, it took you to locations that were a little bit adventurous, going over to Molokai and going to Tahiti and South Africa and those sorts of places. And in the early days, there wasn't many ocean races going on around the world, and Molokai was the big one. And I don't know, I just found that, like, I did pretty well at the surf club stuff, but I just found that there was a lot of baggage around surf life-saving events for me. I like the fact that I could roll up and do an ocean race and you're kind of done with it. Whereas the surf club stuff, if you went to the nationals, it was a 5-day thing, and it chewed up a lot of time, and you only got to race it, a few times each day. And I kind of liked the fact that I could spend 2 or 3 hours on the ocean and get a full day's racing in, and rather than sit on a beach and do a couple of events here and there. And but don't get me wrong, I loved doing the life-saving events, and I loved any sort of events in the water. But for me, the ocean paddling was more the preference.
You said there that you enjoyed the choppiness of the ocean, and you do it as Chop, but I understand your nickname on Instagram is Chops Gardiner. So is this something you thrived on and you found was one of your, leg ups in those long ocean races? Maybe one of the reasons why you didn't go with, say, flat water racing on a K1, for instance?
Yeah, well, I'm actually named Chops because I was a fat kid, so that's how I got that nickname. But it kind of, a lot of people associate it with the downwind paddling, which is kind of cool too. So I'll take either one. I was happy being a fat kid, and I'm happy that I can ride ocean chops. So either way, it doesn't really matter too much. I've forgotten the rest of your question there.
Was it one of those things that became a strength for you? You say you love going out in the choppy waters, and growing up in Perth, where you would get a lot of that chop from the wind and the conditions there. Did you feel like that gave you a bit of a leg up when it came to?
Yeah, I've always been someone that likes the unknown, and for me, some of the sports, the paddle sports that I've done in the past, there's too much that already. The beauty of ocean paddling is you don't know what your next stroke's going to put you into. You don't know what the next chop's going to do. That, you know, every single thing, every single 5-second period of ocean paddling is completely different to the previous 5-second period. So I guess I've always liked that. I've always been one of those people that if I saw a hill, I'd want to walk up the hill and see what was on the other side. So I guess ocean paddling fitted that bill more than like flat water sprint paddling. And I did 1 or 2 years of that, and I just didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it one bit. I love the hard grind, I love the hard work, and I love all the training associated with it, but I just didn't like the racing. So the unknown of the ocean and the fact that you roll up one weekend to a race and, you know, it's 20K downwind, and next weekend you roll up to another race and it's a 20K downwind, but it's completely different to the race you did the previous week. Whereas flat water paddling, you paddle down a 1,000 or a 500 metre course, and pretty well the same as the venue you raced at a couple of weeks ago. So surf lifesaving was good too. The ski racing in surf lifesaving, that offered a whole bunch of variables as well. So I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the days when there was a lot of movement on the water, and that obviously made it tougher, but also more fun. And the one thing that was significant during that time for me, when I was you know, going pretty good at that sort of thing, was generally you were racing the same guys, so we all had the same, you know, pretty close to the same skill set. So, which was pretty unique in a sport where there's so much variable. So, you know, there's a lot of people used to turn up for the national titles surf ski race. There was, you know, when I remember looking at the entry list some years, and it was well over 500 people. So, and you get down to 12 people on a Sunday afternoon, and it was a fantastic feeling to look down on the beach and still have your ski on the beach, and you're only one of 12 skis that are still on the beach ready to race in the final. And that was a pretty great feeling too. So I enjoyed that.
And so I think that's a commonality among some of the people I've spoken to on this podcast. We look at Kendrick and Dean Summers, who I spoke to in the last episode, and just the open nature of the ocean and how conditions changed between swims or events. And so one of those that you did in 2004, the Cape Town, was the first ever ICF Surf Ski World Championship. And you took that out over Herman and Tim Jacobs, and that was in pretty rough conditions and rough seas. So what I was sort of getting at there was, is this where you feel like you thrive in those tougher conditions?
Yeah, most definitely. I think that if you enjoy something, you're always going to go better at it. And for me, there's a lot more enjoyment in water that has movement and variables on it than flat water. So, and that particular race had a lot of swell. It was, it was pretty big. And Tim and myself and another guy called John Chalmers, who was a good paddler at the time, we were the part of the Australian team, and we sort of took a bit of risk and went really, really close to the surf breaks on that one, and it kind of paid off for us. Well, it definitely paid off for me. So, and Tim, because Tim ended up third. So Herman went wider, and I think, you know, 2/3 of the way down the course, us three were the kind of the leaders. So at that particular time, Herman was really, really fast. So to beat Herman in any race was a real fantastic thing to do, and to beat Tim likewise in any race was a fantastic thing to do. So for me, that was a great event, and it was well run. It was well organised, and we all had a fantastic time over there. And we did a double ski race the next day, and I paired up with Dave Kassane in that one, and we did pretty well in that as well. It was a little bit different. We didn't race many doubles over here in Australia, whereas double racing is very big in South Africa. So, but that was around Robben Islands, you know, where Nelson Mandela was incarcerated for a long period of time, which made the event really interesting. And there was big surf in that as well. So, yeah, it's been some fantastic events. And obviously when it's big surf, that's the conversation you have after the race. You know, when it's flat, the only conversation you have after the race is who won. Yeah. So for everyone that's on the water when it's big, there's so many challenging aspects to the race, and when it's flat, then really the only challenging aspect is how far up the field you finish. So that's a fantastic talking point for us, is when it's big like that.
And so it seems like you, and I think you've commented on this in some of the things I've read, you had a sixth sense for the ocean, is what you said, and it seems as though when you talk about that race, how you took the more precarious route, that maybe you had quite a good understanding of the ocean and the intricacies that presented themselves with all these different races. And this came a lot from your time as a professional fisherman in the north of Australia. So you're working up north in the winter, and then you had to bolt back in summer for the racing. And it wasn't until a point where you wanted to progress your career where you actually moved from Perth to actually progress your career. Can you talk us through how character building that point in your life was as a fisherman?
Yeah, well, the fishing days were pretty good. They were really tough. I jumped on my first trawler when I was 16 and went to the Gulf of Carpentaria. And I guess it was, even at the time, I guess it was probably, a weird thing to do, like a lot of people would still be at school or starting a trade or something like that. And I guess my trade was being a deckhand on a trawler. And I think from those early days, the very first boat I jumped on, we left Fremantle on a blustery afternoon and we went straight into a cyclone. So I spent the next 3 days throwing up as we made our way up the coast towards Darwin. And I just remember looking at the ocean, and I just used to think about all the things you could do with those. They were pretty large lumps of water that were moving around us, and I guess I've always just looked at that sort of thing. I don't know if I have a real sixth sense for it, but I when I look at some other people, I just think that they don't look. They think about the paddling too much and don't actually look at what's going on around them and the benefits you can get from utilising the different movements on the water and just having a quick look at stuff that's going on and can really change the course of what you're doing. I fished for about 6 years and ended up moving down to Exmouth on the northwest coast of Australia, and I really liked living there. I didn't really like the fishing in the Gulf of Carpentaria too much because that was full on. And we're on the boat the whole time. The lifestyle in Exmouth was more 2-day or 4-day trips. So sometimes we'd get to surf while we're out at the islands because you worked at night. And I got to surf and I got to play footy in the local footy team and live sort of more of a normal life than the hardcore fisherman that's on the boat the whole time. So that was pretty cool as well. And being on land every second day or every third day or whatever gave you the ability to run, and Exmouth has some amazing canyons, and I used to run through the canyons and things like that. So I was always fit. And then I would spend the summer in Perth, the winter up north fishing, the summer in Perth. I'd work as a lifeguard and then on the beach, and then I'd do all the paddle training through the summer. And through the winter, I just ran and surfed and swam and dove and that sort of stuff and paddled in summer. And then I got more and more into paddling as the years went on, and then moved over to Sydney when I think I was about 23, and then got right into the paddling when I moved over.
Yeah, and so I understand a lot of your training in those early days, even when you were paddling and going back and forth. Kelvin Graham, who was one of the big, strong, I think, swimmers over there, you were really doing a lot of swimming training. Can you talk to us about how you, I guess, translated that fitness and what you learnt through swimming into paddling?
Yeah, with the surf club, I'd do some swimming with the coach there, a guy called Rick Turner, who was a fantastic swim coach. He was a hard swim coach, but I just thought that the races that we were doing for surf lifesaving were roughly the same distance as or time, took the same sort of time as, say, a 200 or 400 metre swimmer. So Rick trained a lot of 200 and 400 metre swimmers and 1,500 metre swimmers. So I just basically looked at what he would do for a session and turned that into a paddling session. So, if we were doing, say, 5 200s on 3 minutes, that would be roughly a 2-minute 20 effort. So to translate that into paddling, you'd do, 5 230 meter or 250 meter sprints on 3 minutes, with a 30. So you'd get in a certain time, or, whatever it took to cover that distance. So obviously the distances are different between swimming and paddling. So however that translated into paddling, you would do the distance that was relevant to the time that the 200 meter swimmer took. So and got into that. And Kelvin was a fantastic paddler. Actually, he was sort of the guy that was the king over there. He was a year older than me, so through the younger ages, I sort of followed him through, and he went on to the Olympics and won a bronze medal and won some Australian titles in surf ski paddling in the life-saving stuff. And fantastic guy. You always sort of look at some of the West Australian guys that have done so well with a bit of pride. They came from the home state. Kelvin was one of those guys. So fantastic.
I guess the swimming a little bit similar to ocean paddling or kayaking in the sense you got that trunk rotation and the pool with your hands. You wouldn't run like you would do if you're in a ski. So
especially me, the way I swam.
Except you'd be like missile.
I wasn't the quickest guy in the water swimming, that's for sure.
Kelvin Graham was someone you looked at in the swimming space and amazing achievements that he was able to accomplish. But was there anyone else you looked up to, like Ken Vidler or any of those guys that?
Ken Vidler was sort of the king at that particular time. Well, prior to that, and then another guy, Greg Mickle, who I spent a lot of time with, and he's one of my best friends. He was an amazing athlete and waterman all round. Like pretty well anything that has water to do it, Greg's pretty good at it. So he was one of the guys that I spent a lot of time with as well. And then all my friends were water people. They all surfed, or they fished, or they dove, or they paddled, or they did something. So I didn't have many friends that weren't associated with the ocean, not because I didn't want to, only because that's the environment that I was in at the time. And if I wasn't doing the paddling, I was surfing, or we were doing something involved in the water. So, and when you're around that crowd, you tend to get, and there's some good quality guys in that crowd, you tend to get dragged along with it, and your abilities in a number of ocean type things end up getting better across the board. So when I was growing up, surfing and Aussie rules were really the only two sports that anyone ever spoke about. Like there was no real rugby codes in WA. Soccer was sort of a thing the Italian kids did, and everything else was AFL and water based, surfing or clubby stuff or that sort of thing. So, and ocean racing didn't really exist then. So the only race that I remember doing was once I paddled to Rottnest when I was about 15 on a double ski with a mate of mine in a race that was just out of the blue, and then the Avon Descent, which was a downriver race in Perth that still exists today, was another big event that we used to do as well. So that had some rapids and trees and stuff like that in it, which was pretty exciting. And then, as I said, when I moved to Sydney, Molokai was really the only major ocean race going on in the world, and I went over and started doing that.
So talk to us about in the 1980s when you moved to Manly. I understand that at the time, being a fisherman was hard yakka. The work was drying up in Perth, and you became a skipper of the trawlers like we talked about in Exmouth. So moving to the norwesterly and developing a new lifestyle, you weren't earning too much money in Perth, and I guess how arduous the work was for you, both physically and mentally. It probably wasn't great for your training as well. So I guess when you made this transition, how did this assist you with developing your prowess as a paddler and as an athlete?
Well, I think the trawler definitely gave me a strong work ethic, because you basically work pretty well all night. You had a bit of broken sleep through the night. You know, the nets would go into the water. They'd come up 2 or 3 hours later. You'd sort out everything that was on it. You'd go back to sleep for an hour or so, and then you'd do that again sort of 3 or 4 times through the night. And then in the day, you'd try and get a little bit of sleep. So you're sort of living on, I reckon, on average, about 5 hours sleep, every 24-hour period, with the longest period of sleep being about 2 hours, maybe. And you would do that for 28 days straight, and then you'd have 2 or 3 days off over the full moon. So it was pretty hard. Like, it was really, and physical as well, because you're lifting stuff, you're carrying stuff, and you're wet, you're cold, all that sort of thing. So I think doing that, and then you get stung by bloody fish and bitten by crabs and all the things that want to kill you on the deck of a trawler. So sea snakes and big tiger sharks and you name it, that all came up in the nets. And then the nice things like turtles and stingrays and those sorts of things. But just all that stuff going on, and you're broken sleep, so you're constantly in like some sort of daze. And then some, as I said, sometimes I'd try and surf out at the islands or on the shore. So I'd surf probably every second or third day. And it was interesting. It definitely gave me the strength to be able to deal with the heavier training load that I took on later in my life, and work and training. I just found it easy where, some people say, oh, I'm not going to get up at 4:30 in the morning to go paddling. Well, that to me is the easy part of it. It's the other stuff that can be hard sometimes.
So when you say it's the easy part of it, I guess now we're in the midst of winter here in Sydney. And I remember my dad getting me up to go paddling at Sydney Northern Beaches Kayak Club, 4:30 in the morning. Matt and myself would go there, getting in the water with our thermals on, 12 degrees. At those early hours in the morning, why was that such a exciting routine for you? And was there ever times when it did get tough, or was it just something that you always thoroughly enjoyed, regardless of whether there was cold conditions or big swells, wind?
It's not something that I, would rave about. There's some mornings I definitely don't enjoy it. But once you're out on the water, then you're sort of, all that stuff just goes away. I find that, getting out of bed is probably the hardest bit, and then getting out of the car and going to the water is the next hard bit. But everything else is pretty easy. So what gets me out of bed each morning is I know that there's a coffee shop here just down the street. So I get a coffee on the way to paddling. So that's enough inspiration for me to get up. And then the next bit's just getting to paddling and seeing the group that I train or train with, and seeing those guys. And I guess the putting yourself in a situation where you're suffering, voluntary suffering, creates a bond with the group around you. So we have an amazing community in this paddling community, and your dad probably would have told you about that. And he was involved for some time, and we loved having Matt down at the sessions. He came down as a big fella, and I know he dropped about 7 kegs in the first couple of months. So he and then he got to do some amazing events. He finished the Doctor, and he did the Molokai with Wayne, as you said, and for him to be able to do that, whereas there's a lot of guys that were in his situation, in their 40s, 50s, 60s, that don't even manage to do stuff like that. They just stay in that same regime of work and bad diet and stuff like that, and they never really experience what we see, what we see every day. So I'm glad your dad got to experience that.
Yeah, and so the voluntary suffering that you mentioned and how that builds a lot of resilience. He always used to mention Yander Morrison and the team down there with their the paddling team that you're associated with. And I think the camaraderie is probably what gets you through a lot of those tough, cold mornings. As much as it's that mental struggle that, through that you develop certain characteristics or values, like discipline and, as I said, like resilience. How much do you think it has been the group that has got you through in a lot of those tougher training days? Is that a big part of why you paddle?
Yeah, massive part. It's as I said, the paddling community that we have, and it's not just one. Like I'm probably involved in a few different little communities of paddlers, but my main one down at Clontarf, the iPaddle group, is a lot of local guys from the Balgowlah, Manly area and Mossman area. So, and they've been training with me since I started in 2002. A lot of those guys. So, and it's nice to see the progression. As I spoke before about, watching Matt lose, 17 kilos in the space of a few months because he started exercising, and watching him finish. I remember standing on the beach. We were about to pack up all the flags and at the doctor, and no, I said we can't pack up all the flags. We've got to leave a few out because Matt's still out there. So, and to watch him, finish the race, well after the large part of the 99% of the field had finished, but to see the joy that he got from completing that event was phenomenal. And I remember the whole group, or a lot of the group, being down there on the beach that day to see that happen, and that was a pretty proud moment for me because Matt had been paddling with us, with Yander and I, and while we're the coaches of the group, the whole group contributes to his result, and they contribute to everyone's result. So if everyone has, if someone has a good result in a paddling event, it's the work from the whole group, because the whole group works together to make everyone better.
And I understand you founded the Doctor, so that was your pride, that race. And so one of the things I wanted to ask you too, you spoke about being on the trawlers and all those nasty creatures like the tiger sharks and that. We spoke to Dean in the last episode, and he was talking about, because he did a swim from Newcastle to Sydney, the first Australian to do that, and there was a shark that was trailing him during that journey. But there's also, when he was actually doing the Molokai to Oahu, there was a 14-foot white pointer which sat right underneath him the whole way, and he obviously had his shark shield. But have you had any instances during your races, some moments where you've really questioned the safety of the situation, whether you've had sharks trailing the boat or other creatures?
You do see a lot of sharks when you're paddling. So it's not uncommon to see a shark. I think probably I've only seen maybe one or two great whites in my, that I know were great whites in my paddling time. And in those instances, they've never appeared aggressive or look like they want to have a go at you or anything. They've just been a bit inquisitive. But we see a lot of hammerheads. We see a lot of other types of sharks, and definitely when I run my paddling trips in the warmer waters, you see the reef sharks and tiger sharks and those sorts of things. But no, I've never been in I've been nudged once by a shark, and that was off Manly, and that was sort of the only time I think that I've had an incident where a shark sort of has shown some sort of aggression. But no, every other time I've seen them, they've actually taken off as quickly as we've seen them. So
yeah, I think Matty said one of the things, and I always asked him about paddling through Sydney Harbour and bull sharks and that kind of thing, but he always said his biggest fear was the Manly ferry coming past and steamrolling.
There's no doubt that that wayward boats or incompetent drivers of boats are the biggest risk that we face. There's no doubt about that.
We spoke to, in episode 12, we spoke to Kendrick Lewis, and when he was early on in his career, he decided to move away from Manly to the Gold Coast. And the reason he did that was he said that the Gold Coast had I guess you'd say, premier surf clubs. They were much more dominant than a lot of the Sydney clubs at the time. And got me thinking a little bit about your journey, and why did you pick Manly over, say, going to some of the more northerly surf clubs up in Queensland that at the time that he was doing a lot of his surf lifesaving were renowned for being strong surf lifesavers in quite tough conditions.
Yeah, no, I've always liked Sydney. Sydney's a great city, and Manly's a great location. Northern Beaches to me is like one of the best places to live on earth, and I've been to a few places. And at that particular time, the strongest clubs in the country were there was one Gold Coast club called Southport that was really strong. Surfers Paradise were pretty strong, but Manly, Cronulla, it was a lot of Sydney-based clubs that were actually the strongest. And I spent a year at Manly. Then the next 2 years after that, Manly actually won the national titles in the point score, which I was super stoked to be a part of. We had some fantastic athletes coming through Manly at that particular time. All the top Ironmen were there, some top swimmers, pool swimmers, and all that sort of stuff. And we had an amazing paddling group, and I ended up running that paddling group out of Manly, and we got fantastic results with that group. And yeah, it was a really, really good time to be in Manly, and so yeah, we were the dominant club for a long period there. So that was a good time. Kendrick's obviously a lot younger than me, and since I gave up the life-saving stuff, my last life-saving carnival was in 1996. The whole thing shifted to the Gold Coast and the Sunshine Coast. The clubs up there have the ability to earn decent revenue through the pokies and their restaurants and their bars and things like that, whereas we don't have those facilities in Sydney. So it's a lot tougher for Sydney clubs to survive, and to survive and then support the athletes they're trying to get to their club. So I guess the big thing up in Queensland is they can do that.
Yeah, that was one point of discussion we had. We were talking about financially and, the opportunities that were available for him up there at the time. Aside from, say, Ken Vidler and Kelvin Graham, who were some of the more exciting but also challenging individuals you got to train with and compete against at the time after moving to Manly? I know some of the training partners you had included Ironman Guy Leach. Were there any others that come to mind?
Yeah, Tank Bennett, Greg Bennett, from Barry Bennett Surfboards.
Boards, yep.
Barry's son. He is a friend of mine, and we used to paddle a lot together. And then when I first moved over, there's a guy called Steve Wood, who was an amazing paddler and a very inspirational guy. So he used to sort of run the whole group. Then he ended up moving up to Queensland, and we had a good core group of Tony Vicelli, another guy, Tim Watkins, and then we had a whole bunch of youngsters that were coming through that were all really, really good. So it was a really good time down there. What's that?
Steve Wood?
Yeah, Steve Wood was he was sort of the inspirational guy. He sort of got everyone off their ass and made everyone work hard, and he's the sort of guy that you go to meet at 4:30 a.m. at Manly Dam for a training session, and he would have got there at 4:15 a.m. to do 15 minutes more than you. So that's the way he operated. So which was cool. And then obviously Leachy and the other Ironman guys. Leachy and I used to train together on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the lagoon at Queenscliff. And we used to do this session that we just smashed ourselves over a 2K effort and ran into shopping trolleys and all sorts of stuff in the lagoon. And we did that. And yeah, there's a bunch of guys around, but it wasn't just at Manly. There was the whole Northern Beaches. That was the powerhouse for surf lifesaving in the day. And all the Uncle Toby's and Nutrigrain Ironman were based on the Sydney Northern Beaches, whereas it's completely different now. So it was a very good time to be part of. And at that particular time too, water sport was huge here because all the world champions in surfing too had come from this area. Damien Hardmans and Barton Lynch's and Tom Carroll and all those sorts of guys. And there was a whole bunch of, top pro surfers. So there was a lot of activity going on in the water in this area.
It wasn't until Grant Kenny won the Molokai at 16 years of age the news of a lot of endurance events happening in South Africa. It wasn't until this time that paddling and ocean paddling in particular didn't start to get a lot more popular. Was one of the reasons that you chose ocean paddling over, say, Ironman or surf lifesaving, which you could have done because, you know, you were training with people like Guy Leach, who were class endurance athletes as well. But was it ever a matter of thought where you considered the fact that it wasn't maybe overpopulated, the sport at the time, and it was a good opportunity for you to make your presence felt amongst competitors because you were going into a sport which maybe didn't have the same opportunities and exposure that surf lifesaving had at the time?
Yeah, like I probably would never have been a top Ironman anyway. I did quite a few of the events. I wasn't a fast enough swimmer really, and the basis of an Ironman race is swimming really. If you're not a fast enough swimmer, there's no way you'll ever make a good Ironman because it's the leg that, you know, like the bike leg really counts in a triathlon. It's the swim leg that really counts in a Ironman event, in a surf Ironman event. So I hadn't had the swimming background that a lot of the other guys had. You know, I never swum as a kid. I only did it for a couple of years in my late teens, and I got reasonable at it, but I never got good at it. So, to make big gains in swimming, you have to do so much work to gain precious seconds. And for me, it wasn't something that I wanted to do. You know, belting out 10 swimming sessions a week. It's not my sort of thing. So, the ocean was my attraction. So, and yeah, but all the top ski paddlers at the time from the surf were all doing whatever ocean races presented themselves. So the 20 beaches started in 1991, and
Yep.
that was the first big race in Australia that sort of gained a bit of traction, and it's still going today. It's run by a fantastic group of people that put that together now, and yeah, so. And obviously the support from Shore and Partners over the last few years has really boosted that, and then the other parts of the sport as well.
I understand you throughout the 80s, though, were very strong in your performances in Ironman, and that really hooked you. You went to every event since like the Molokai Ironman, the first event. You won all the events throughout the 90s pretty much. You were very dominant there. So the 90s, going on to break some records there. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and the Molokai to Oahu?
Yeah, so I started doing that in 1989, and then obviously I kept going there for a long time afterwards. So through the 90s was sort of my heyday, I guess, if you like. That was when I was being able to train and actually try and do well in that particular event. And so I did that through the 90s and broke the record in 94 and 97 and held that through to 2018. And then I kind of went in 2002. I started the Australian Ocean Racing Series in Australia, and that sort of sapped a lot of the drive for me to actually compete myself. So whilst I was still doing the events and still doing pretty good, I wasn't sort of focusing on the events from a racing perspective. I was focusing on the events from an organisational perspective, and I think doing the hard yards then has helped grow the whole sport and turn it into what it is now, where it's, you know, it's a pretty decent sized sport now with groups all over the country, and you know, so I'm glad that I made that decision then, because you know, how many Molokais do you really need to win? But I would have liked to got 10. That would have been nice.
So when you're doing those Molokais, what was it that made you so strong with that particular race? Like, why were you winning every year? Was you just familiar with the course? You know, what was it about the race that made you so strong?
I just, you know, I was obviously a lot fitter, younger, and more enthusiastic. I think when I look at some of the really fantastic athletes, you know, obviously at some point, if you don't have a physical breakdown, you're going to have some sort of mental loss of mental drive to be able to keep doing what you're doing. So I guess, for me, apart from the fact that I made a physical decision not to focus on the racing, and part of that was because I probably didn't have the drive to keep going in those races. So I still enjoy racing, and I still race today, but I don't really care how I go that much. I still race hard, and I still try and do the best I can. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to lose any sleep if I come second or third in my age group, or, it's not a big deal to me anymore.
So as we said at the start, 24 years you held the record for. It wasn't until 2018 where Cory Hill actually broke the record.
Yeah.
I understand him and also Hank are your good friends, but Cory broke the record, and then in 2018, and then the following year, Hank then broke the record for the Molokai. What is it about paddlers' times improving now? Do you think it's a combination of the fact that the sport's getting more popular? Sports science is improving, training techniques, nutrition, all that kind of thing, technology. Or do you think it's, one or the other? What's your perspective on it?
Oh, well, the craft are definitely better. So there's definitely an advantage in the craft we're using today compared to the craft we were using in the 80s and 90s. There's no doubt about that. And not only the shape, but when you look at the weights, we were racing 15, 16 kilo skis. Now we're racing 10 kilo skis. So there's a bit of significant difference there. The ability for the boat to run, a longer waterline, stiffer boats. So there's definitely a equipment advantage. The paddles are better also. So when I first started doing Molokai, I was using flat paddles. Obviously, the paddles now are the winged shaped paddles, so they're a lot more efficient in the water. I think the sport was competitive back then as it is now, and you only need to look at the times for that. I look at some of the guys that are still going today, like Grant Kenny and Oscar Chalupsky, Martin Kenny. Lewis Laughlin, even the next little generation of Tim Jacobs and those sorts of guys, they still do really, really well in open races. So I saw there was a race on the Sunshine Coast the other day, and Marty Kenny, I think, was fourth or fifth, and Grant, who was paddling a spec ski, was in the top 10. So, guys close to their 60s, it's almost embarrassing for some of the open and younger competitors to get towed up by these blokes. So I don't know. I think our work ethic back then might have been a little bit harder or a little bit higher, and our drive to win is definitely stronger. So I think that's seen these guys keep kicking, and a lot of people. We've been really, really lucky that we can continue doing what we'd love to do, and even at this age, whereas back in the day, a paddler in their 30s was considered a really old bloke. So, so it's definitely changed.
We spoke to Dean about how he fuels his swimming, and one of the things he used was a lot of cordial, and he would stop every half hour or hour for feeds. And we talked about the fact that he would have not much throughout the journey. He'd have small hits of you'd say fast acting glucose. I guess the added benefit for you of being a ski paddler is you have your craft there, and you can imagine store things right in front of you for easy access. What kind of food or nutrition did you use to fuel your races, considering they were probably a lot shorter than Dean? He's been swimming for 31 hours or so, but for around a 4-hour race like the Molokai, 41 miles, what kind of things were you eating? Were you able to keep dry carbohydrates within the craft while paddling, or what was your go-to?
I've never really been big on that stuff. I just get whatever was on the servo on the way to the airport. So to get over there. So it might be a bottle of Gatorade, it might be Powerade, or it might be something like that. So I've never been a big one on the nutrition thing, and I think sometimes that's probably been detrimental to performance. But I guess ocean paddling is the skill is such a big part of it. So the physical aptitude isn't really as important as well. It is important, but it's as important as the skill level. So I'd sort of just didn't like the fact that I had to think about other things. I'd rather just go out and paddle. So when I did do a race from Chicago to New York, which was a 30-day stage race where we're doing 50 to 60K a day, that was predominantly flat water. And on that one, you'd take food because you really needed it. And your body was wasting away, when you're doing an event that long. So you really needed to make sure that you supplemented whatever you had. And we'd gorge ourselves at night, get up and do the thing the next day to another town somewhere in the US. So, but for Molokai, any races under sort of 3.5 hours, I've never really considered food to be needed.
So when you started the Sean and Partners National Series, which you can see there on your shirt or your puffer jacket there, the Sean and Partners Series, that was all came about through, a kind of chance interaction you had with Keith Fenn in South Africa. Can you talk us through just how much of an influence, I guess, his interaction had on you and how your paddling progressed? Because I understand that you never really wanted to part ways with Ray Burton skis. And it wasn't until that interaction you had with Keith that you actually, changed your tune a little bit and you got into a Fenn and you've been paddling Fenns ever since. So talk to us about how the Sean and Partners series came about and your connection to Keith and paddling in South Africa.
Yeah, that's it's kind of two separate things there. So Sean Partners are the sponsor of the Australian Ocean Racing Series, and that came about through a chance meeting with a guy called Earl Evans, who was the co-CEO of Sean Partners, and we met at Molokai back in about 2015, somewhere around there. And he said, "I'd like to get involved with your events. I'd really like what you're doing. Can I get involved?" And I said, "Oh, that'd be fantastic." And he said, "Give me a call when we get back to Sydney." Now, in defence of myself, I get a lot of people saying that to me, saying they want to sponsor the events because they've seen it. And so I quite often I don't follow up with it. And I didn't follow up with Earl. And then he called me a few weeks later and said, "Why haven't you followed up with me? I want to sponsor your events." And then that's when I knew he was serious. So Earl, the whole Sean Partners thing has been absolutely fantastic for not only for the sport side of it, but for the community side of ocean paddling as well, and then all the charities and everything associated with that. Sean Partners has been a major contributor to every charity that's involved with ocean paddle sports and things like that. So they've been an absolutely awesome sponsor, and they're not a sponsor that sits back and watch it all happen. They get their hands dirty and get involved. So it's been a great trip for us, and we're stoked that they've been a part of this whole thing. With Fenn, I went and did a race in South Africa, and Keith Fenn said to me, "Do you want to use one of my skis?" And I said, "Sure." So I used one of the first Fenns in a race, and I did pretty well on it, and I liked it. And I said, "Oh," he goes, "You can have that one." And I went, "Okay, can I buy 2 more off you?" And he said, "Sure." So I had 3 skis. I rolled up at Cape Town Airport, and I put the skis on the airplane with me, took them on as personal luggage, and they put it in the hold, and I arrived in Sydney, and that was the start of Oceanpaddler. That was the start of the business. So I sold the 3 skis. Well, I used one for a while myself, but I sold the other 2, and then ended up bringing a container of skis in, and that was in 2001, and it's sort of gone from there. And I started the training groups at the same time, and we started the Australian Ocean Racing Series at the same time. So everything happened at once. And then the Australian Ocean Racing Series was originally sponsored by Men's Health magazine. I know you're into your gyms, so you'd know all about that one.
Who's told you that, Matty? Did Matt tell you all about that?
Yeah. And I saw, Men's Health were a great sponsor for a number of years. And then we sort of went from a few different sponsors. Some sponsors didn't pay us. Some sponsors were dodgy. Like it just went, we pretty well funded the sport for the next 10 years. And through Oceanpaddler and ski sales and things like that. And then as I said, in about 2015, Earl and I met, and that's when the sport's gone from strength to strength.
Why did you use Keith's Fenn in South Africa? Was it just because he offered you to give it a try, or did you did you actually require it, like your boat, and come over across? Or
Yeah, no, it was. I think it might have been pre-organised. I can't actually remember the details of it, but I think I was doing a race over there. The organiser said, "Keith will give you a ski if you want to use it." And I went, "Sure, yeah, that's fine. It'll save me carrying a ski over." And the South African skis were way better than the Australian skis. So they were longer, they were sleeker, they were faster, and they surfed better. So the Burton was a fantastic ski for me right up till the turn of the century. But I always knew that the South African skis were quicker.
so that Ocean Racing series where you partnered with Men's Health, tell us about how you, I guess, developed that connection. Like, how did that come about?
So myself and another guy, we approached Men's Health. He was involved with one of the kayak shops, and we put a race on from the Spit to White Bay, and I actually won that race. And then Men's Health got involved. I can't remember how that happened, but that was the Men's Health magazine was owned by a group called Murdoch Magazines, which had 3 magazines: Better Homes and Gardens and Marie Claire, which were all very, very strong magazines. They were quite a good company. And then, so during that period, they were very supportive of the events. They didn't put any cash into the events. We sort of funded that side of it, but they did get some other additional sponsorship, with car companies and things like that, who gave away a car for someone to use for a year and things like that, which was really fantastic at the time because there was no money in our sport at that particular time. So, and we'd cop up the prize money and whatever other prizes we could come up with. And the magazine, due to its reach, had a lot of small supporting sponsors. So we always had people wanting to sample and stuff like that. So we could always give away decent prizes and race packs and stuff like that. So it made it good, but it was still a financial burden for us. So we were putting a lot of the money that we earned from ski sales back into making sure the sport just kept growing and kept going forward.
So the first of those Ocean Racing series was held in Balmoral, 2002. I think at that time you were only getting about 14 competitors per race. And so to go from there to now having 16 races, 5 state shore and partner national series, to go from 14 competitors per race to now over 500, what do you think is the biggest factor that's influenced that growth?
Exposure. So it's one of those things that perpetuates, kind of like during, like when you look at during the COVID period that we had, which was a pretty weird period, but ocean paddling boomed then because people were at home, they had nothing to do, they couldn't go to work, so they looked for things. And if you owned a bicycle shop or a surfboard shop or were involved in the ocean paddling industry, business went nuts. So I know we sold out of everything that we had, and people just saw people paddling on Narrabeen Lake and go, let's try that. So it went berserk during that period. And I think that prior to that it was just a gradual expansion, that just kept growing. So obviously, if someone buys a ski and lives out at Stratfield, someone sees the ski at Stratfield and goes, "Oh, what do you do with that?" And I'd come down and paddle with me on, the upper reaches of Sydney Harbour, and okay, that's what you do. So where do I get one of those from? So that's how it grows. It hasn't been something that you've been putting ads on television and trying to get massive exposure, but it's just been more like an organic growth, I guess, through word of mouth and through people just seeing what's going on.
You think another draw card is nature of the sport itself? So my dad grew up, he played a lot of rugby, had some knee replacements and ACL injuries. And for a lot of people in their older age, 50 to 70 sort of age bracket who are getting into paddling, and you see a lot of them these days in that kind of demographic, is one of the draw cards the fact that it is quite easy on the knees and the hips, and it's a good sport to keep fit in that sense for a lot of older people that maybe have had some issues with those joints or
When
parts.
you look at the beauty of, sorry to butt in, but the beauty of ocean paddling is that it's a sport and it's a recreation. So it's not like someone that does triple jump, for example, right? You don't go, oh, I'm just going to go with a couple of mates and throw a few triple jumps in, or or do a couple of high jumps, or whatever. It's you can go for a paddle by yourself. You can treat it as a race. You can treat it as a recreation. It's kind of like walking or riding or a lot of those things. But I guess the beauty of paddling is that it's weight supported. So most guys in their older ages can't run anymore. You're not on a road, so there's no chance of getting hit by a car. And for me, and for a lot of people, I guess swimming laps of the pool can sometimes be a bit tedious too. So it does offer the ability to get outdoors, see a lot of stuff. You travel a lot of distance when you're paddling, even if you're paddling slow. In an hour, a slow paddler still covers 8K. So you see a lot of stuff in that time, especially on Sydney Harbour. It's the most beautiful place on the planet. So why wouldn't you? Everything's just saying, why wouldn't you just get out there and do that? So and the craft now is stable enough to take an absolute beginner. So look at your dad. He's a classic example. He came into the paddling group at about 130 kilos and got on a ski. He fell in a lot, sure, but he persevered and by the end of the summer season, he was down to like just over 100 kegs. So he'd really done well to do that and persevere with the colder days, where you're falling in the water and stuff like that. That's still an adventure as well. So it's all a learning thing, and it's the group, the people around you that drag you through the harder times there.
I guess when you're doing these ocean paddler recreational trips, like going to Nigaloo Reef, Western Australia, and that kind of thing, like what other elements of paddling, aside from selling boats, the community, and your own competing, is there any higher purpose for what you're doing at the moment for the community, or is it still sort of ingrained in building Ocean Paddler and getting more people to these events and just building the social element around it?
No, there's the trips expose people to locations and an environment they probably would never see in a normal excursion, if you like, or in a normal holiday or a trip. So when we go to Ningaloo, the people that come on that trip just see so much. They see so much of the whole peninsula, from the inside of the Gulf to the Ningaloo Reef, the whale sharks, and all the creatures that inhabit the reef. And it's a real eye-opening experience. And if you were to turn it into a religion, it would be my religion. I guess I guess I'm a priest that's preaching this stuff. Get out there and have a look at this stuff. The only thing is I don't have to fight anyone about it. The beliefs, because everyone agrees that when they see all this stuff, everyone's of the same opinion. It's just amazing, and ocean paddling really enables you to be able to do that.
Given the nature of paddling now, and you've got all these different crafts, and some of them are thinner than others, some of them are wider than others. There's an abundance of different crafts that you can paddle, and it means that there's a lot more variety and availability for everyone to get involved and get started. I guess what would be your advice for any recreational paddlers out there who are interested from transitioning from recreational paddling, which they may have adopted during COVID, into getting started with competitions and racing?
Yeah,
Where would be
they've
the
just
best
got to
place to
learn. They've
start?
got to learn. So they come and either pick up a ski or join one of the beginner groups and get going. And there's plenty of those around. So they can contact us at Oceanpaddler and we can put them in the right direction. So, but the easiest way to do it is just try and find a really stable craft. Be careful. There are some dodgy people out there that'll sell you a super unstable craft telling you that it's a stable craft. So just go to the right places and try a couple of different boats.
How did you kind of navigate a lot of the challenges, the organizational challenges, but also promoting the ocean racing series in Australia? So what were like some of the, I guess, big hurdles you had to get over with a lot, implementing a lot of those events?
There's hurdles every time. Hurdles continue. So I guess some of the bigger hurdles initially were the opposition from certain groups about what we were doing, and I'm not big on fighting. I just want sort of everyone to be walking down the same street. So um, I've tried to get some groups involved over the years, but they sort of either believe that it's not for them or that we're doing it wrong or they can do it better. So, which is fine. Everyone can have that opinion. So we just try and keep doing what we're doing and focus on that and try and make it better than it was the previous year. And if we keep doing that, then we can't really lose, I think. And from a compliance perspective, there's always hurdles with government agencies, and you build a relationship with someone at a government agency, and then they leave the next year, and there's someone else there that has their opinion on how we should be running something that we've been doing for 20 years. So, there's continual hurdles with events. There's no doubt about that.
How's technology evolved in the context of these events themselves, but also for paddlers personally in terms of their own races?
Well, yeah, you can take a mobile phone with you. We can track now, so there's a whole bunch of stuff that's really helped from a safety perspective and also from a visual perspective too. Because ocean racing, really, unless you're on a boat next to someone, it's not the most exciting sport. You see them leave, and then 2 hours later you see them come in. So if you can track it online, then you can actually watch the race unfold and see where the people made their move and stuff like that. So we've been working really hard to develop that part of the whole thing. And once we get that down pat, then I think that'll be a really, really big part of the growth in the future.
And so if there's anyone there thinking about coming and joining your group, Dean, I guess what would a typical, I'd say, training week look like for those down at Quantum?
When they're coming initially, they would look at just coming once a week and then go from there. And then in time get their own craft, and then they can go whenever they want, because not all the training groups fit into the lifestyle of people. So some people might be able to train early, some people don't like training early. So and some people like nights, some people hate mornings. So there's a whole range of different things that would do, but they should just contact us at oceanpaddler.com and we can sort of steer them in the right direction.
So I guess what do you see for the future of ocean paddling globally? Where do you see the sport heading in the next few decades?
Well, we're just continuing to do what we do. We see more growth in Australia. Other countries are taking up the sport, and the Europeans now are very, very good. The sport's been dominated by South Africans and Australians for so many years. Now we're seeing Spanish and French guys and girls starting to do pretty well, and obviously New Zealand has a few, and the odd one comes out of Hawaii and the US and stuff like that. So it's definitely becoming more global, and kind of had the same growth as what I guess surfing had, where the Australians and Hawaiians were the dominant players early, and then now you've got Brazilians and mainland US guys and Japanese surfers, Indonesian surfers, European surfers that are all doing really well. They're all on the World Surfing Tour. So I guess we're kind of similar to that in some ways. It's sort of grown like that. People that are interested in paddling in the ocean and have sort of embraced the sport in different parts of the world. So it'll just keep growing, no doubt.
It's been a pleasure to chat with you today, Dean. Just before we wrap things up, I just want to maybe touch on some of the more memorable moments throughout your career and some of the things you're most proud of achieving throughout your time in ocean paddling and what you've been able to do with Oceanpaddler.
Yeah, well, I guess a lot of the stuff we talked about, but the community is the thing that I'm most proud of. It's there's some amazing people that have embraced paddling, and to be quite honest, we don't get many dickheads. So I've really enjoyed that part of it. The different personalities that sort of blend in to the idea of trying to do the same thing as each other. So I think that's really important, and for me, that's probably what I'm most proud of. There's a few races I could talk about, or I'm very, very proud of the doctor. I'm very, very proud of the relationship I have with Shaw & Partners. Very proud of the way the 20 Beaches has developed, and because the race fell over a few years ago, it was badly managed and collapsed. And then a mate of mine took over the race, and then I've been sort of helping him, and there's a whole committee of us that sort of help with that, and so proud of that also. And then obviously proud of the business. Yander and I have created an amazing business, so immensely proud of that as well.
Do you have, I guess, in the next year or so, are there any particular events coming up that you're competing in, or do you have any other of your participants at your program that are going in any of these events?
Yeah, all the events kick off in August, so all the way through to the end of November. So all the guys that train with us will be doing those races, and then I'll be doing the races, but I won't be too flustered if I don't do too well in them. I may even paddle a few of the races with Earl from Shaw & Partners. We might do a few on the double. So, so it's exciting.
Is there any particular music that you listen to on the way to paddling on those cold mornings that you might add to the Normalist playlist?
I listen to a bunch of different music. We've been listening, myself and the boys, when we go surfing, always try and listen to different songs on the way to surfing. But one of the ones that has been really popular with us when we go to the beach has been Changing of the Guards by Bob Dylan. And then I think it's called Oahu by Gurrimal, which I really like as well. So there's a couple for you.
Right. We'll add Changing of the Guards by Bob Dylan. All right. Well, thanks for your time, Dean. Do you want to leave a message for Matt? He's probably sitting there listening to this in a couple of weeks, in a week or so, once it comes out. So you got anything to say?
Just that I really look forward to being able to hopefully get up and see him soon. So I'm sorry I've missed the last opportunities to do that, but I do plan to get and come and see him as soon as I can, and I hope he's doing well.
Wayne's listening to it too. But anyway, thanks for your time, Dean. I really appreciate you. It sounds like your wife's there in the background cooking dinner, so I'll let you get off and have some food before you. No doubt you got to get up early for paddling tomorrow, so I'll let you head off, mate. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Hayden. Cheers, mate.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Normalist Podcast. If you enjoyed listening, please don't forget to rate the podcast or subscribe to our YouTube channel for more clips from each episode. You can also find us on all social media platforms using the handle @Normalist Podcast.